All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming this evening to our leadership workshop. This is an annual event that the Phi Epsilon Kappa fraternity puts on each spring. My name is Dr. David Lorenzi, and I am the executive director of the Phi Epsilon Kappa fraternity. And we are pleased to have an outstanding guest speaker for you this evening. I am going to turn it over to our current president, Dr. Ann Hickey, and she will go over the procedures, kind of the agenda for this evening, and introduce our speaker to everyone. Thanks again for attending.
All right, thank you, David. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our event. I'm really excited to have everyone here and to have our guest speaker here. In terms of the format for this evening, we will have our guest speaker give his presentation first, and then we will have time at the end for question and answer. And so I'm going to ask everyone at that point in time to put your questions in the chat, and then I will read your questions from the chat for our speaker. And so to introduce our speaker, Leo Lewis, he has extensive experience in various areas within athletics, within professional sport, business, teaching, research, and the Lewis Sports Foundation, and has been able to demonstrate his strong leadership skills in all of these different areas. And I'm happy to have him join us tonight to kind of share his insights with us on this topic of leadership. So Leo, I turn it over to you.
Oh, wow, Ann, thank you so much. And thank you, David, for inviting me. Certainly, this is a wonderful day. I am so pleased to speak with all of you students and staff. And, whenever I have an opportunity to talk about my experiences, I'm elated. And I promise that this will be relatable, that you will find that my journey through sport and physical activity has been varied. I kind of call it an eclectic style in that I've been all over the place. Let's put it that way. And so I wouldn't necessarily tell you that I've gone the traditional route, maybe a route that you're thinking about, nor will I tell you that I've been bored all my life either. I'm at the end of my career. I have to admit, I'm at the end of my career, and I have a lot of reflective ideas as well as mementos to go over with you. And I promise that it will be relatable. I think this whole topic about leadership takes on a different type of context as we discussed today. I think oftentimes you can lead by example. You can certainly lead with your words and actions that also speak to people and impress people or give people a sign that you indeed are serious about your undertaking. You can certainly be in an authoritative position that's given to you to certainly expound on your leadership principles and actions as well. How it relates to sport, well, I'll go over that. So I think what would be the best thing for me to give you in some context is I'm going to try to attack this in three different ways. And that's because I've had a varied career. I've had an academic career. I've had a participatory career as an athlete. And I have had a social service career that has really been more involved recently, that involves philanthropy, community service, and I think they all tie in together. So let me start from the beginning. Certainly, I think one of the things that I can say to you, I would have never thought that I'd be in a position that I am in today. If I knew that I would be here today talking to you with this with this resume, I would say, man, you're really kidding. But I have to believe, and I want to tell you, it was not done casually. I had a lot of hard work in front of me, and I think one of the hardest thing that I had to do was succeed academically. it was easy for me in some respects compared to my academic regimen to be an athlete. I grew up in Missouri, Columbia, Missouri. Went to a high school in Columbia that was known for its athletics. I played 3 sports, and lo and behold, I was a quarterback for our football team, and we won the state championship. And through my 3 years, lost only 3 games. So you would think that coming from a successful team, that meant that we were going to continue our careers after high school. Well, 21 of my teammates did play college. 4 of my teammates played in the NFL. So that is to say that I grew up in this era of a grand importance of football, particularly, but sports for males in high school was one of these identity elements that gave us confidence, gave us an opportunity to seek other pursuits, and in my case, gave me enough confidence to say, well, maybe I can do this at the college level. I ended up staying at home and going to the University of Missouri, go Tigers, and an unlikely high school prospect. I have to say, I was only 5'8", but played college football at the quarterback position. And however, I had a lot of competition, and 3 of the guys that I played with in college all played professionally. So I changed to the wide receiver position, played with a lot of players who ended up going to the NFL. And lo and behold, after not being drafted, I ended up going to the NFL and played for a few teams, but ended up with the Minnesota Vikings and ended up playing 11 years for the Minnesota Vikings as a wide receiver. But I say that in that sport was a family process. And I say that because my father was a professional athlete as well. Actually, he was a college football American. My mother was a physical education teacher. So both of them were pretty active, rather active. And both of them went on to get college degrees and also got graduate degrees in their interests. My dad, after his professional career, became an athletic director and an instructor at his alma mater, a small college in Missouri. And he ended up coaching 3 sports, one of which was a women's basketball team. My mother was an elementary school teacher, and she stayed at that particular time. But one of the things that I think needs to be mentioned about her is that she couldn't go to the University of Missouri in the 1950s. She went to a historically Black school instead. And although she couldn't go to school in her hometown, was able to still pursue a college degree. However, she did get her master's degree at the University of Missouri. I say that in that these 2 folks were only caring about the stats on my grade card. They had no idea or cared anything about the stats on the playing field for me. So early on in my life, I was really destined to graduate from college because I had such ardent support from my parents. They wanted to make sure that I went to college just like them. But funny as we say, it was tough graduating from the University of Missouri. When my athletic career ended there, I wasn't drafted. So I had to go back and finish my college degree. Certainly when my eligibility ended, I didn't have enough credits to graduate. So I went back after pursuing a year with the old St. Louis Cardinals, who are in Arizona now. And I got cut and went back and finished my degree. I played my second year in Canada, got cut, came back and started my graduate degree. And it just so happened in the early 80s that this nuanced subculture called sports psychology caught my eye. And a very wasn't noticed by a lot of people. It just so happened we had a course in graduate school at the University of Missouri that was called sports psychology. And I got pretty interested in it because it really dealt with how an athlete, in some part, how an athlete deals with competition from a mental preparation standpoint. And I could see those elements in my experience as a student athlete and as a professional athlete. I ended up following my wife to the University of Tennessee and finished my academic career at the master's level. And I got a little bit more involved because I indeed stuck with a professional team and ended up playing 11 years. Consequently, in the off seasons, I wasn't sure each year of my career was destined. So I went back to school and finished my master's degree at the University of Tennessee with an emphasis in sports psychology. But I got more of a sense of two elements in this pursuit. And that was the advent of and the experience of elite athletes and what they go through in the industries of intercollegiate athletics and professional sports. And that inquiry also was in its infancy. There is very little, except for the popular media, very little research on professional and elite athletes and what they go through. And that caught my eye too, because I was living it. I was actually living my dissertation, to tell you the truth. So that caught my eye. And then also athletic administration was in its infancy as well, in terms of a discipline or a sub-discipline in kinesiology and physical education. So I ended up finishing up at the University of Tennessee. Underwent this self-examination of my career as a professional athlete, still getting pressure from my parents to have an alternative career, and at the same time decided that the plight of athletes, particularly in my case, the plight of Black athletes was there was dismal research on the experiences of Black athletes. So I took to those notions of athletic administration and the exploration of the experiences of Black athletes at that particular time while I was still playing professional football. Incidentally, I continued to work full time through my master's and my PhD careers. At the same time, in trying to get an alternative career in my mind, there was a lot of curiosity, yet a lot of confusion about how I could make a living outside of being a professional football player. And that was one of the instances that got me to explore the plight of elite athletes even more. What do they do after their career ends? So I jumped on this whole new advent of research called career transition with athletes that adopted the career transition of the worker class in our country, which invariably ends in their 60s. And in trying to adopt the theoretical framework of transitioning and retiring in the work world, kinesiology and sport psychology adopted this circumstance where we need to research what happens to athletes when they retire. So that became one of my research interests, and lo and behold was one of the topics that I used in my dissertation in my PhD program. I ended up moving back to Minnesota full time, finished my career in 1991. So I ended up playing 11 years with the Minnesota Vikings. And during that time, in the off season, I went to the University of Minnesota and started my PhD there. And lo and behold, I would take classes, but I also was given the opportunity to teach activity classes in the off season. So I would be there a semester teach a couple classes, but also go and take classes, graduate classes, during those years. Lo and behold, when I did retire, I was given the opportunity as well to work for the Minnesota Vikings in their front office. And I just so happened to have some friends, well, people who were friends of my father's, who were also working for the Minnesota Vikings. And I will talk about that later, who offered me the opportunity to be a professional scout for the Vikings. And I took the opportunity to do that. So in some respects, in the early 90s, I was working full time for the Minnesota Vikings, and then also taking graduate courses at the University of Minnesota. In understanding my interest in career transition, I got an idea, a novel idea. Why don't we examine current NFL players and ask them about what their thoughts are about their career ending? And certainly you would think that, these athletes in their prowess as athletes probably thought that their career will never end, but we all know it will end. And in some respects, careers end before these athletes know it. So I was fortunate to get the opportunity to be supported by the NFL as well as the NFL Players Association to back my dissertation on researching current NFL players and asking them, first getting a profile of their thoughts regarding vocational interests, academic interests, relationship interests, and to get some baseline information from current players, which really rarely had never been done before. And to be able to get them to give us some input and some data about what their thoughts were currently as current players, but then also what their thoughts were about what might happen after their career ends. So I will end it there in terms of my academic pursuits, only to say that I ended up going back to get another master's degree about 10 years later. And it was because I was given this opportunity to head up our team's player development program. In 1993, some of you weren't born then, but I know you need to know this information. In 1993, the NFL went through unprecedented change. For the first time, they introduced free agency to the players. At the same time, that gave the NFL and teams the opportunities to really scout veteran players who were out on the streets because of free agency, which meant that player movement was going to be much more substantial in the league. So teams had to keep up on some of those players who were nearing the end of their contracts. Okay, so in some respect, it was something that I think helped the league to have a person like me who had a background in career transition to head up a career development program. Today, there is some sense of a career development program with these league teams. They venture more into equity issues that players have and capital that players have, and how they want to venture into social media, branding, and entrepreneurship. And very little interest nowadays is in going back to school to finish their degree because they're making so much money now that really kind of distracts them from really being more academically grounded. Let's put it that way. So I think that at that particular time in the early 90s, player development was a boom. It was really critical because now the NFL teams had a support mechanism in place for players while they're still playing. And they would address academic issues, career development, financial literacy, and relationship issues. During the course of those years, between 1993 and 2005, when I was in the front office, I addressed those issues, but I was missing something. And I think that one of the things that you find out when you are mentoring folks is that you need to have some expertise in mentoring and counseling individuals. So that prompted me to ask the Vikings to help me go back to school and get a degree in marriage and family therapy. And initially, all I wanted to do is learn some of the techniques of counseling. But as I got halfway through that, I said, "Oh, I might as well just go ahead and get a degree in this and get licensed." So I ended up going to Argosy University, which had a campus here in Minneapolis, and getting a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And that has been the bridge and the support for my ongoing pursuits now. So I want to kind of give you some instance in regard to my work life. I actually did start working in sport right after I became a college intercollegiate athlete. During that time when I was in between my college career and my professional career, I became a graduate assistant at the University of Missouri in their athletic department. So I started coaching at that particular time. When I got to the University of Minnesota, I started teaching classes in their activity class work. And that was a bridge to what I'm doing now as an instructor in their kinesiology, in the School of Kinesiology, where I teach a social and cultural class in sports sociology. But really, being player development kind of solidified this whole research interest that I had in career transition for sports and athletes. That ended it there. As my stint with the Minnesota Vikings ended in 2005, I settled for work at the university level. And I ended up starting the student athlete development program at the University of Minnesota in their athletic department. And certainly was elated by the fact that then I could work with athletes of many sports and work with women as well. So that really helped expand my expertise in student athlete development. I'm a program type of guy, so I ended up creating some programs that nowadays you find at these university athletic departments now that are almost a matter of fact now in terms of helping student athletes succeed and graduate from college. Lo and behold, I ended my career at the high school level as a high school athletic director for 4 years. And now it brings me to the current state of affairs in what I think is a more broad outlook on my life and my career. I'm really happy to say that I'm still doing research. I embarked on an effort a couple years ago to create a research issue, let's put it that way, and program to find those athletes that I surveyed way back in 1993. It just so happens I surveyed the entire league. Pencil and paper tests were not even considered the best way to do it back then. But I mailed, thanks to the NFL and the NFLPA, 1,800 players, the entire constituency of the NFL, in a mailed survey in 1993. Lo and behold, I got 500 returns. I've got 500 players return the survey in the mail. And I still have those surveys because I knew it would help me in the long run. So because I know who actually took the surveys, my colleagues and I have started to find these players, and we're going to do a longitudinal follow-up survey with these individuals once we find most of them. I don't intend on finding all 500. As a matter of fact, I would say about 25 of them have passed away already. Most of them are going to be from the age 50 to 70 now. But it's going to, it kind of got me going here to say this would be a fun time to really have our former players reflect on their careers and substantiate what they said they were going to do in 1993. I also was doing some research about my dad, and I want to share the screen with you because I think it's really important for me to get you to understand that I'm embarking on a big reflection tour. I'm reflecting back on research that I did 30 years ago. I'm also reflecting back on my original and long-standing interest in the Black athlete. And because my father was a professional football player, it gave me much more interest to initially do a biography on his career and also do some introspection about my family, because in essence, my grandfather was also very interested in sport and physical activity. So I'm writing a book on my father and my family, and I'd like to share a little bit about that through photos. I have here a 1916 photo of my grandfather. I have his namesake as well as my dad's. I'm Leo Lewis III, but he's in the back there in the backfield. And this is a photo of a barnstorming team in 1916 where my grandfather engaged in football in this case. And back then, certainly through Jim Crow segregation, Black athletes couldn't participate, nor could they play against white teams. So they had their own teams, and they would barnstorm. In this case, in Des Moines, they would barnstorm through other cities, other Black communities, including Minneapolis, St. Paul, and participate in these amateur games. And just so happens to be football. So my grandfather ended up being a barber because that was one of the few honorable jobs that African American men could have at that particular time. And he moved his family, his wife and 11 kids, to St. Paul, Minnesota. And that's where my dad was raised. One of the things that I do know was my grandfather's passion was golf. And it just so happens in the history of public facilities in St. Paul, Minneapolis, many of them were open. And there's very little evidence that even in the public school system that there was segregation in the Twin Cities. So my dad did not go to segregated schools. He went to integrated schools. Whereas my mother in Missouri, most of her academic career was in segregated schools. I even went to segregated schools in the early 60s. So it's not that far away in terms of how we can surmise the conditions of our public school system, but then also how sport reflects those thoughts and laws and circumstances that go back for decades. My dad was a all public school athlete, played 3 sports, became a college football American at Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. He was drafted by the Baltimore Colts at the time, but decided to go to Canada to play because he wanted to earn $1,000 more in his contract. It just so happens, here's a photo of my dad receiving his All-American Award with 2 individuals that are very interesting in terms of our conversation here. My dad's in the middle. He was an ROTC recipient as well. On his left is his athletic director, Dwight Reed. On his right is a guy named Ray Kemp. And I want to talk a little bit about those two. Dwight Reed was also raised in St. Paul. And by and large, he had the opportunity to go to the University of Minnesota in the 1930s and play on 2 of their 3 national championship teams. So he was an all Big Ten in. But one of the things about that is that in 1933, the National Football League barred African-American athletes for about 13, 14 years. So he couldn't play in the NFL. Consequently, he went in the Army, ended up becoming a college football and track coach, and became my father's coach and recruited my father from St. Paul down to Jefferson City, Missouri at Lincoln University. Incidentally, Ray Kemp was the athletic director at Lincoln at the time. But what is most interesting about Ray Kemp is that he was one of the last Black players in 1933 to play in the NFL. I told you before that the NFL barred Black players after 1933. Ray Kemp played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and all of a sudden he couldn't come back to training camp in 34 because the NFL owners decided that they were going to bar African-American players. And at that particular time, you know, the country was going under a significant amount of turmoil. You had the Great Depression, you had the advent of the Second World War, and rations were rare, jobs were rare. So it seemed natural to exclude people at that particular time. It wasn't until 1946 that the NFL regained their interest in African-American athletes and re-upped the draft of African-American players. The next one is a Winnipeg Blue Bomber photo. My dad played in the Canadian Football League for 10 years. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's on our left. And the guy in the middle, his name is Bud Grant. He was a legendary head coach at Winnipeg before he came down to the Minnesota Vikings and became their head coach. As a matter of fact, he won 4 Grey Cups up in Canada before he came down here to the NFL. Bud passed away at age 94 last year. On his left is the quarterback Kenny Payne, who was an Iowa grad, played in the Rose Bowl. Kenny Payne just passed away at the age of 89 last week. And I was fortunate to be able to talk to him a couple of years ago before he passed. But these 3 people were inseparable from 1957 to 1966. And consequently, because they won so many championships, they had great teams. So I was very fortunate to be coached by Bud Grant too for the Minnesota Vikings, and certainly a pleasure. One formidable time period in my playing career, but then also my academic career, and I'll go back to that in a minute. My mother was a physical education teacher. Here she is playing basketball, and was the homecoming queen, certainly relegated in some respects to those opportunities for girls and women in sport. They became cheerleaders, and was, you know, certainly important to be a homecoming queen as well. This is her during a physical education class, and look how she's dressed. Well, she's got her pencil, she's got her papers, and lo and behold, she has an overcoat. Apparently it was pretty cold there. So I wanted to make sure that you understood that not only am I pursuing my passion, but I have a legacy, a family legacy in this area of sport and physical activity. Lastly, I want to kind of tell you a little bit about my philanthropic and community service. For 23 years, I've embarked on a youth foundation that encourages kids to pursue personal development and community activities And it was an offshoot of my whole notion of career transition for athletes. I just went a step down to the high school level where I tried to provide programming for high school athletes to get them to understand that the odds of them playing at the college level weren't great either, and that they should prepare for other interests, including career development interests. And I use sport, and I've continuously used sport and physical activity as a platform to be able to reach these kids and to send messages of lifelong learning, of citizenship, of integrity that we find in sport, but then also that we can find in our interpersonal relationships as well. So we're pretty successful. One of the things that I think I'm most proud of, as we go back to my slides, is that I've had a celebrity golf tournament for 22 years, where I've asked teammates and other celebrities from around the country to come for a foundational weekend to raise money for my foundation. So that really kind of speaks to what I'm doing now. I'm running my sports foundation. I'm doing some consulting with athletes. I'm doing research and writing. So I've got a full slate, even at my ripe old age, but I'm doing it on my own time. Let's put it that way. And I think that's all I need to talk about. I really do appreciate everyone's interest and sticking with me on that. I mentioned to you again that this is an eclectic life. I tried to encapsulate these pillars of my interests in sport and physical activity. But as you well know, I've benefited from those experiences that I've had early on. And this wouldn't be the right thing to do unless I knew that I had that passion for it. So so currently, Ann, David, if you're still there, I'm teaching at the University of Minnesota. I'm doing research. I'm holding this annual fundraising effort to work with kids. Incidentally, through those efforts, we've adopted a college model on academic counseling, and we're starting to fund a position at a couple high schools for student athletes. And the position is designed to be what we consider in the college model an academic counselor. So I'm happy with how that's going. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you, Leo. So at this point, we will open it up for questions. And as I mentioned in the beginning, if you do have a question, if you could drop it in the chat, and then I will read the questions for all of us. And maybe as people are, or go ahead.
Okay, I'm trying to get out of here. Hold on. Okay. All right.
So maybe as people are typing, kind of one, maybe I'll start with.
Okay.
So thinking about kind of the future of sport, you've had this kind of extensive experience within the sport world and different aspects of sport. Thinking about kind of the future leaders that we have on this Zoom with us.
Yeah.
What do you think are going to be some of the maybe most important skills that these leaders are going to need to kind of help them get to where they want to be to achieve their kind of full potential?
Of course. You know, if you want to be a researcher, you know, getting your PhD is a formidable way to solidify your interests and to, you know, bear the grind. You know, certainly academia is tough. But again, if you have a passion in some interests, like I do, since I've been doing this for 30 years now, I would certainly pursue a PhD. If you want to get into sport management, I'm kind of saddened that some of the professional schools are taking over some of these positions just because they have, you know, a degree in law and business and and have licensures in the behavioral sciences. I really feel that if you're going to be a sport manager, that you should have some business and legal acumen. That those are the two that I feel and I've seen have been the positions that have been occupied at the high levels in sport, even at the college level. If you have a law degree or an MBA or a specific business degree in sport management, then I think you're going to be very successful. What does that bode well for physical educators? Well, it's good to have some sport background, but I think that's just the one step to you getting to another level. If indeed that's where you want to be. If you don't want to be in management, then you can be a little bit more specific in things like academic counseling, athletic training, equipment management, and you can be the heads of those departments as well. Both of them are really involved, and they keep you busy. But again, I think it's going to, for example, if you want to be an equipment manager, you better learn about the industry, learning how to purchase things, how to allocate things, how to make sure that you have a communication skill with your coaches as well, and know what equipment is best for your student athletes. Certainly academic counseling, it would be good to get a counseling degree, but then also understand a little bit more about sport. That's where I think the sport background could help you much more. And certainly athletic training, it'd be good to be certified as an athletic trainer. And that's continuing education as well. So this is the first step for you undergraduates, but each one of these professions have a pretty distinct pathway to be able to be successful in those roles.
Thank you. And we do have a question in the chat, so I'll go to the chat. The question is, what do you believe are some of the most important outcomes as a result of the NFL study?
Well, I think one of the things that the initial outcome was that we found out that in 1993 that most players did want to get their degree. They just didn't know how. And at that particular time, neither the NCAA nor the NFL provided assistance after they were playing. They had to go back while they were playing. And then we also found out that the most important relationship that our NFL players had, whether it was disruptive or not for them, was their significant others. And that could be their mother, could be their girlfriend, could be their wife. Those were the three people that emerged as very important people in their lives. Career-wise, I think everyone was pretty moot and silent in those aspects. And in some respects, I think we couldn't decipher anything significant in what players wanted to pursue while they were still playing football. So I'm really interested in understanding those individuals that we surveyed, what they indeed did pursue in their post-career.
Great, and I have another message that just came to me, Pam, but I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud. First, go Pack Go. She's from Wisconsin.
That's why I don't wear green now.
So lives in Texas now, coach track and cross country at the University, Minnesota State. She is a member of our PEK board of directors. So she was wondering if you were in the University of Minnesota programs with Gary Wilson. He was her college coach at UW La Crosse.
Yeah, well, Gary Wilson, if I can recall, yeah, he was the track and field coach at Minnesota when I was there. Yes, we primarily left at the same time, but had a great relationship with him. He understood the plight of elite athletes, and because he coached women, he really understood what needed to be done in terms of solidifying that coach and student athlete relationship.
Nice. And then what can you remind us what years you were with the Vikings?
I was with the Vikings from 1981 to 1991, which seems to be a long time ago.
All right. And she says, thank you for your passion and your journey today.
Yes. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Leo, I had a question for you, if I can jump in. What advice would you have for our future professionals as far as networking? You kind of went over the educational path for them, but obviously the networking part of it, and your athletic accomplishments and reaching, the professional level probably helped,
Mm-hmm.
open some doors for you and make some good connections nationally, but maybe for students that are going to pursue a more traditional, academic path into
Of
the
course.
workforce. Any thoughts on that?
Okay, so we're talking about academic path or work path,
Um,
or
I
both?
would say, to help them into a future career as far as networking,
Yeah.
finding opportunities, what kind of advice you would have with
Yeah.
that?
Well, I think that, the first thing that comes to mind is just don't turn down anything. I think you really need to focus on what are your goals today. Your goals will change, but what are your goals today, and what do you see yourself doing? And then start developing a circle of influence, whether that's people who are in the industry currently, uh, individuals like yourself who can become peers for you. Certainly connecting with someone who has had experience in an endeavor that you're really passionate about or interested in is probably the most important relationship that you can develop. And then does your coursework align with your interests? Because sometimes, for example, I stayed in the behavioral sciences. I didn't venture into biomechanics or pedagogy or anything like that. I stayed in the behavioral sciences, and I learned, I had time to learn what I wanted because I was playing for 11 years, and then I was in the front office for 13 years. So I had time to decide what I could do as an alternative stepping stone. I just happened to decide that teaching and research was another thing that I like to do.
Good, thank you.
Let's see, and there's another question from the chat. So this one says, what advice would you have to the future leaders of athletics who don't know whether they want to seek a career that helps the general public health or college, high school athletics?
Wow. Well, high school athletics obviously is a public domain. So I think you can certainly learn a lot there. You probably don't have as many resources at the high school level. So, you're going to be more apt to learn the tricks of the trade and be able to do more than one thing. So that's why I call my career an eclectic life, because, you have to be a master of a lot of things, to tell you the truth, if you're in the public domain, like in high school, or at the amateur level. I don't necessarily call intercollegiate athletics amateur athletes. I call them elite athletics. That's a different prospect. It is who you know, certainly, but I wouldn't turn down any job that gets you closer to the industry that you want to pursue, whether that's a volunteer job, whether that you're helping someone else out, and your role is very trivial, but you're always looking and taking in information and data about whether this is good for you or not. So my advice is to be able to do everything that you can, and understand what would that goal be. If indeed you decide to do something, what would the goal be for you?
Let's see, I've got a couple questions coming in now.
Okay.
So our next one, can you talk about what you received on your research on athletes' mental sports psychology?
Well, I think, okay, let's say this. My research was on career transition. Okay. And at that juncture of my career, I really decided that the sports psychology piece was my practical element, and the sociological and cultural issues I dealt with theoretically. Okay, so I teach sociology of sport, and I teach the culture of sport. But if I'm ever doing anything practically, I'm mentoring and working with student athletes in a counseling relationship. Okay, so I think, you know, when we kind of talk about sports psychology, it's becoming again more and more a power of the elite professions. In this case, I believe sports psychology is being robbed by the medical community and not giving us educators enough breadth to work with student athletes or any other type of athletes. For that matter, you know, athletes aren't the only population that you can work with some background in sports psychology or the behavioral sciences. I mean, you could be an educator for just about anybody who is in a performance role with their company, with their school, you know, with their fraternity or whatever. You know, I think you can certainly help just about anyone who needs assistance in understanding the mental processes that go on when you want to be successful and perform. I would say this: I've really fixated more on working with athletes who have had injuries or have injuries. I do have an appointment with Northwestern Health and Sciences University here in Minneapolis, where I work with. They train chiropractors and massage therapists, and they have nothing in their curriculum that deals with the psychological response to injury. And so I kind of fit in a respect where, yes, indeed, your injured folks, your people who need your assistance, go through a mental processes that needs to be taken care of or have some care. So it's interesting that those professions, although they're ascribed to the medical model, have not seen the mental processes of their patients as being something they need to take care of.
Thank you. We have another one in the chat. This question asks, are there internship opportunities with the Vikings and most NFL teams in strength and conditioning or exercise science?
There are always internships with the pro teams, but you have to really work 6 to 8 months in advance. Though it might be too late for the Vikings, but you know, they have gotten such, you know, the Vikings, like many of these professional teams that are conglomerates now. I mean, you know, we had 200 employees when I was with the Vikings. Now it's about 500 employees, believe it or not. And you know, the Vikings just built their complex several years ago, and it's a monstrosity. I mean, it's like another city. And so there's always going to be opportunities working for these teams, but you know, they want to be able to have their employment statuses in place before the draft starts, for example. Okay, and that's in April. So in some respects, this could be the end of their hiring, but at the same time, you're dealing with two different segments of these teams. You have the personnel, the pro, that they call the pro personnel side, which are the players and coaches, and all of those supportive professions. And then you have the business side, which deals with all the other elements of the organization: social media, marketing, you know, facility care, you know, HR, you know, those elements that are similar to a normal business entity and what they provide. So you have to make a decision on, you know, what side you want to be on, you know. But what I would say is to look them up, understand their dichotomy of offerings in terms of how are they framed, how are their employment statuses framed, and figure out what attributes you have for an internship. Now, I would say this: yes, I said try to get anything you can get, and if you can get anything working for the Vikings, I would pursue it. because what's going to be done by osmosis is that you're going to learn a little bit about the organization anyway by just being there. So won't you check them out? They may still be giving out internships, but I know one thing: they start hiring right at the end of the season.
We are just about at time. Leo, any final thoughts or words for us before we close out for the evening?
Well, I hope I haven't been too dire in your prospects of getting work, but I think one of the things is if you're passionate about what you do, yes, the money will come, but you'll be much happier if you're working in the auspices of your passion. I was very fortunate, so I'm not really trying to tell you that you should do this and you should do that. Everybody is on their own pathway. I've always said that as a counselor, as a leader, I want to meet you where you are. I want to make sure I know where you are in your thinking and your prospects of work and your passion about things. And if you're in physical education and part of this fraternity, then I think that says a lot about your seriousness in staying in this world of work and physical activity and sport. So you'll find your niche, and granted, 5 years from now, you may not necessarily be doing the same things. This profession is very dynamic. So good luck.
Thank you. So then I just want to thank you, Leo, for spending part of your evening with us and sharing your experiences with us and our future leaders. It was great having you here and great to see you again.
And of course, it's always good to see you. It's been a long time. David, thank you so much. We appreciate you too. And I hope I've been helpful. At the same time, I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you guys.
Thank you, Leo. Really enjoyed your presentation and learning about your background. You have quite a family lineage. No wonder you ended up being a professional athlete. That's incredible.
Well, I tell you what, if it was up to my parents, it wouldn't have mattered.
Mom was probably glad you finished your education while you were playing, which I'm sure wasn't easy to juggle both at the same time as well. Fantastic. Well, thank you for spending some time with us this evening. And thank you everyone for attending. Thanks, Ann, for organizing. We appreciate it.
Okay, you guys take care.
All right. Good evening.
All right. Good night.
Bye-bye.